Hi there. Okay, so I want to talk today about seller's escrow. In other words, I've done a video before about what happens during escrow, but it was more geared towards buyers. I hit me when I was talking to one of my sellers that really that video is not the most appropriate one for a seller to watch because there's other things on the seller side of the transaction that deserve a little bit more digging in. So let's dig in. The first thing I want to make sure that you know is that I'm a licensed real estate agent. I'm not an attorney. I'm not a CPA. So every situation is going to be a little bit different. So I'm going to guide you every step of the way if you're one of my clients, obviously. And for this, otherwise, just informational purposes, if you're selling a home. And I want keep in mind too that we are in Southern California. Every little area has its own quirks. And I'll touch on that a little bit as well. But for the most part, as an example, there's states that have attorneys that close escrow or that don't close escrow because then it's not escrow that close the properties, the transactions. Whereas we have escrow officers who do that, right? So everything's going to be a little bit different, but I think this will give you a general overview, but specifically think about the Coachella Valley, Palm Springs, Rancho Mirage, Cathedral City, Desert Hot Springs, Palm Desert, Indian Wells, Indio, Coachella, Bermuda Dunes, La Quinta. I don't think I missed anything. Thousand Palms. Anyway, you get the idea. Our area, our valley, this is very more niche down for that, but it's going to be similar in most areas of Southern California, maybe not so much in other areas of the country. So anyway, so this is really just a general overview. My goal is to kind of walk you through what's going on behind the scenes and not for your specific circumstances. So let's talk first about the big picture overview. Once we're under contract, we're going to move into the escrow period. This is the window where the buyer completes all of their inspections and their due diligence. Their loan gets finalized if they're getting financing, and we work through all of those remaining steps to get you to the successful closing. Think of this as the execution phase of the sale, where I or your agent are actively managing the timelines, protecting your interest, and making sure that we stay on track. Also, just one thing to keep in mind too, this is something that I'm happy to share with anybody who wants it. Again, keep in mind that your circumstances may be different, but if you would just like it I'd like to have this just as a general overview, just leave me a comment below and let me know where to send it, and I'd be happy to do so. Speaking of leaving a comment, I do love hearing what people think about the videos. If you have any questions, and I'm always happy, I will always answer all of them. Maybe not as quickly as I would like to, but I do try. And then also, I know there's not a ton, but I have to go back and check all the time. But anyway, also, if you would be so kind, if you are enjoying this video, I would love for a thumbs up. And if you've been enjoying several of my videos, even subscribing, that would help me out a lot. I really am trying to grow this channel and it would mean so much to me. So back to the file at hand. So let's talk about how everything stays organized. So what I do personally is I create a Google folder for all of my clients. And the reason I'm bringing this up as sort of a general overview is because I'm going to be putting this on YouTube as information for people out there who are looking for answers to things like this. But I also use this and other videos as part of my just customer service that I do for my clients. So if you're watching this and you are one of my clients, then just know that these are things that I am doing for you specifically. And this will be in the email that I send out to you, which I send to every buyer and every seller about, okay, now you're in escrow, what happens next? So from either side of things. So in this particular case, I create a file for all of my clients in Google Drive where they can go in and they can get any document that they need that has come through. They can see everything that we're doing. And so if they go back and it's 2 years later, they're like, where's that termite report that we had? For whatever reason, I think I'd like to look at it, even though I sold the home 2 years ago, right? So they can go to that drive and they can pull that report. Same thing for all of my buyers, obviously. It's probably a little more useful for them. But another thing that will show up in your Google Drive too is your settlement statement. I always send those out the first of the year. Anybody who closed with me the year before, I always send them their settlement statements because you will need those for your taxes. But they're still just going to be sitting in your Google Drive. So that's where I like to keep everything, and I like to make it very transparent so that everybody has access to everything that you need. So what I do is, as soon as your contract gets signed around, I will put it in that folder for you so that you can go access it anytime you like. Any disclosures that you've signed, the buyer signed, all of those will be in there as well. Escrow documents, you'll have access to this not just during escrow, but my intention is to basically keep it forever because it's actually tied into my branding, Angel Real Estate. So if at any time too that I was ever gonna quit the industry, which it seems very unlikely, but if I were to quit it completely, I'm sure I'd come up with something else. I'll send you a thumb drive. That sounds kind of old, doesn't it? Just kidding. It's going to be in the Google Drive. Don't worry about it. All right. So my team, for me personally, I want to make sure that you know. So I have a transaction coordinator. Her name is Carlita, and she is fantastic. So she's going to be working behind the scenes. My clients will see her sending out different things to be signed. One of those things as a seller is, and this will be true probably anywhere in the country, is you're going to need to fill out seller's disclosure forms. Basically, it's you, the seller, telling the buyer what you know about your home. In our area and in our state, some of the things that are required are anything that you know about that you even maybe got an estimate for. So maybe you were thinking about getting the roof replaced. Seems excessive with a tile roof, but let's just say you were thinking about getting that done. You got an estimate for that roof and you never did anything with it. Well, just as an example, if you were ever to go and talk to your neighbors once you've closed as a buyer, or your buyer rather goes and talks to your neighbors and they go, you know what? John was getting a quote for that roof to be done. Did they replace the roof? And you say, no. And he never even told me he was getting a quote for the roof to be replaced. What's wrong with the roof? What happened? What's going on? Again, I mean, we all forget things. I forgot some things when I sold my house that I was like, I can't believe I forgot that. And if you're, truly going through the motions of trying to think about everything you've done, it would be great if you had a copy of that estimate, even if it was done 10 years ago, to give to the buyer. That's an excessive example. But let's say you bought your home a few years ago, you should have a copy of your inspection. It actually is required that you provide, at least according to the attorneys that I've listened to, it is required that you are to provide that inspection if you have it. Maybe you don't. Maybe you have no way to get a hold of it. You forgot who your agent was. You don't know. Maybe you're not like me and have everything on your computer or whatever. Most people are just living their lives. If you don't have it, you don't have it. But if you do, it would be important to be able to give that to your buyer. And it would be great if you do, because honestly, anything that you do in that realm as far as your disclosure requirements, the more robust you can make that disclosure, the least chance you're going to have somebody coming back and go, they were trying to hide this or that. It's like, no, I told you everything I could think of. To me, that is by far the best way to do things. Disclose, and then disclose some more, because nobody can come back and go, well, they hid these things from me. No, I told you everything I could think of. That's the way to do it. It's the way I will do it. It's the way that I do it when I'm selling my properties. I think everything I can. And again, we're not perfect people, but I think it also shows that you are invested in making sure that you are doing your best to disclose to your buyers everything that you know about the property. So when those disclosures come through, it would be great if you were to actually do those with that in mind. Everything you can think of, don't rush through them. Take some time. They're not really that long, honestly. They seem longer than they are because there's a lot of duplicate questions, if you will. So there's a transfer disclosure statement, and then there's a seller property questionnaire, and both of those you need to fill out. Those are statutory requirements in the state of California. Also, the solar form, if you have solar, I'm not 100% sure if that is a statutory requirement, but if you have solar, you should fill it out and the buyer should request it. Also, there's the natural hazards disclosure report, which is also required to be given to the buyer. However, that report, you don't fill out. That is a report that you'll get from a third party letting them do the, because you don't know, right? Let them do the research on the flood zones and the earthquake zones and all the things, okay? So, and fire, obviously in California, that's a big deal. Now, in the Coachella Valley, we do not generally see high fire risk. We see very low fire risk in our area. By comparison, it's one of the reasons that I like it here. I grew up in Napa Valley and they have fires. And but anyway, so that would be another disclosure form. But again, it's not something you have to do. But when you get those forms, I'm just going to restate it. I'm going to overemphasize and just spend a little time here. It would be very, very good for you to really take some time and think them through and answer them as best you can. One thing that I see happening a lot on sellers disclosures is when you're talking about commonly managed properties, stuff like that. Most of us, let's face it here, live in a homeowners association. So when the question is, are there any common areas that people are using? Yeah, there's probably a pool, there's probably tennis courts, there's probably a gate, maybe a guard gate. I mean, yeah, usually the answer is yes. Okay, keep that in mind. So are there CC&Rs? Covenants, conditions, and restrictions? Normally the answer is yes, almost every time. Not every time, almost every time. Okay, so those are some things that you want to just take a look at. So every contract is a little different, but the big things that we're going to be tracking are obviously the purchase price and terms, which we will have already come to an agreement on by the time we get here. Any credits or concessions that we negotiated, right? So make sure that everything that's been brought up is going to show up there, that Escrow has it, and especially, what's going to be benefiting you. Make sure they have that. What's included or excluded with the property? Okay, this is a big one. So in not the disclosures, in the purchase agreement, in our case, it's the residential purchase agreement, or we call it the RPA. When you fill out that form, when your agent fills out that form, when I fill out that form, if I'm a buyer's agent. And as from the seller's point of view, you just need to know what to leave, okay? But when the buyer's agent fills out that form, there's boxes to check on the appliances that will stay, okay? So refrigerator, washer, dryer, dishwasher, blah, blah, blah. Typically, the way the language reads, again, I'm not an attorney, but if it's built in, if the cabinet is surrounding it, then it needs to stay. And if it's not built in, or if it's but you can slide it out, it's a question mark. And it's really something that you need to have a big conversation about as a seller if you think it's okay to take that piece. I have seen some ugliness show up from this. And let's face it, would have been, in this particular case that I'm thinking of off the top of my head, would have been a lot better if the seller would have let us know that they were going to take some things, but they didn't. And technically they weren't checked. So was it built in? Was it not built in? I don't know. It's good to talk about these things up front. In our case, it wasn't checked. I don't know. This is something that you really need to consider as a seller. If it is probably part of you should have a conversation, basically. So look at that page. Have your agent, or for me, right, make sure that you understand what needs to stay, right? Another thing that happens here is there's a lot of furnishings, and those furnishings are usually left at no value, right? They're just, people have second homes here and they're like, it's actually more valuable to me to leave the furniture than to take it with me, which means it means nothing to me as far as value as part of the price of the home, other than the fact that I do not have to take it out because I already have a house full of furniture somewhere else. And I would rather just leave this furniture here, right? So if there's exclusions, we need to make sure that those exclusions are in writing, and we need to make sure that everybody's very clear as to what stays and what doesn't when it comes to all the appliances, all the furniture. And if you see turnkey as part of the property, it means that in theory, and this is subjective too, that's the other thing you need to keep in mind. I've heard agents say, well, turnkey means the golf cart stays. Well, not necessarily, Generally speaking, turnkey is you should be able to walk into the home with your toothbrush and you've got everything you need. You've got towels, you've got utensils, you've got furniture to sit on, you've got a TV to watch, you've got glasses to drink out of, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that typically is turnkey. If it just says furnished, generally speaking, it is furniture, not towels, not utensils, things like that. If it is partially furnished, that pretty much, I'm sure you can figure that out. And a lot of times it's whatever's in there is staying. Okay, closing timeline. Something to keep in mind is when you're going through closing as the seller, unless otherwise changed, you will need to be gone from the property when it closes. Period, end of story. So it's not 6 o'clock. Unless it specifically says that. The default language in our contract says that you need to be vacated from the property at the time of recording. So how does that work? So on the day, let's call April 9th. Let's say that's when we're closing. I'm filming this video today on April 6th. And I actually have one closing on April 9th. So, or is it the 8th? Anyway, no, I think it's the 9th. Yes. So when Escrow gets all the funds that they need, they then tell title, okay, we have everything. We are clear to close. We are ready to record. Title will then go to the county, and title will change from the seller's name to the buyer's name. And then once they get that, then the county gives a number for that recording, okay? And when we get the numbers, then you have officially recorded and closed. So once we hear from title and or escrow that we have officially closed, that could be 10 o'clock in the morning, it could be noon, it could be 3 o'clock in the afternoon. It will more likely be around 3 to 5 o'clock in the afternoon. That is most likely when it's going to happen, but not always. As soon as that happens, it's no longer your property and you need to be out. And what you will do, by the way, is you will leave your keys in the house, usually on the island or countertops in the kitchen. As a seller, I would recommend leaving also a note. Anything you can think of that's just specific to your house and how it works, and maybe the mailbox key with which mailbox it is, because I get that question a lot. Buyers, agents will get a hold of me, hey, which mailbox is theirs, right? You know, if there's a cluster of mailboxes, and there's a lot of that here. Different things that maybe you're like, they should really know that, this happens, I don't know, I don't know, I'm trying to think of a good example, but something like for me, for some reason, every now and then our powder bath fan will start clicking. It's almost like wind caught it and it just tick, 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 tick. And then if I turn it on and off, it'll usually stop. Okay, that's just a small thing. But like I might leave that for my buyers so that they don't think there's something wrong, right? Excuse me. So if they think that there's something that, they didn't tell me, is there something wrong with that? It's like I said, sometimes the wind just kind of picks up the fan and, and like, hey, by the way, don't worry about that. That'll happen. Or by the way, the electrical box is over here. And I don't know, I'm just thinking of just, the oddities, like the things that happen in your home that about that because you've learned it over the years. So anyway, that's something to keep in mind. I would leave that with the keys with more information about this key goes to this door and this key goes to that door and stuff like that. Most buyers are going to have the property rekeyed anyway, but it's still nice to know. So, okay, contingencies. This is a big one. So contingencies are one of the most important parts of escrow. It's basically the way that the buyer protects their earnest money, okay? So during the contingency period, the buyer can cancel for a variety of reasons. And again, some of them are just subjective. I don't like the rules that the HOA has about parking overnight. And I didn't realize that that was a thing here. And we know we're going to need to park on the street. And so you're not going to buy an HOA probably, but that would be something that somebody could come across and go, yeah, I don't like that rule, right? Or there could be something else, but they can back out and they can keep their earnest money, right? Because if their contingencies are still in place, the contingency's only real job is to protect the earnest money, because otherwise, who cares, right? So if I'm a buyer and I'm buying your property and I want to buy it subject to my inspection of the property, my agreement to the HOA rules, and my ability to get the loan that I've been pre-approved for but heaven forbid I get fired from my job halfway through or something like that. All of that would protect my earnest money until I physically remove those contingencies. In California, we are an active contingency removal state, meaning that you as the seller are kind of backed up against a wall when it comes to contingencies. So basically, one thing that I think a lot of people do get confused about, and I don't blame them, is keeping of the earnest money. So this buyers need to remove their contingency by signing a piece of paper. They've got X amount of days and the default is 17. So we've got almost 3 weeks where the buyer can do all the due diligence that they want. They can work on getting their appraisal done. They can work on getting their loan finished. They can check every little thing about the house that they want. Let them do this. Do not discourage any of this because that would look like you're trying to hide something, obviously, even if you're just annoyed by it. But basically, the contingency period default is 17 days. So then when we come to day 17 and they haven't removed their contingencies, now we have a conversation. Or maybe even day 15, hey, we're getting awfully close. We want to see those contingencies removed. How's everything going? And we can talk to the buyer's agent and kind of try to make sure that everything's moving along. If the buyers do not remove their contingency and clearly everything is taken care of, now we might have a situation where we give them what we call a notice to perform. If you give the notice to perform, and again, this is a general conversation that we're having, okay? If you give a notice to perform as a seller and you say, hey, buyer, I want you to remove your contingencies. You've had your time. You've had 17 days to do it. You've had 15 days, and in 2 days it's 17. When you give that notice to perform, they have 2 days to either remove the contingency or you can, at your option, unilaterally cancel the contract. But you still don't keep their earnest money because they never removed their contingency. So it's just something to keep in mind because honestly, at the end of the day, most of the time, you, especially in this market, you really don't want to cancel the contract unless you have a backup offer. And we're not seeing a lot of those right now, and markets shift and that could change and be more in a seller's favor again. But for now, you just kind of have to you don't have to put up with anything, but you might choose to put up with it if you're just like, I really don't want to kick them out, but maybe I want the leverage to do so. If I think if they're really just not going to perform, then I want to be able to just go back and go try to sell it to somebody else. And that's the way that you would be able to put your house back on the market and not be held hostage by this buyer. But at the end of the day, they still would have to remove their contingency in order for the earnest money, again, in theory, to become yours. So there could be things that are different about that, but that's generally speaking what we're talking about. Now, here's an interesting part as well. Typically, these would include the inspection contingency, like we talked about, appraisal, loan, review of documents. The inspection contingency, if they ask for anything to be repaired, and most of them do, that would be normal to get a request for repair. And if they do, on the request for repairs, it says that if you as the seller agree to do what they want, or if you give them a counter, because this is another point of negotiation, just so you know. This is a point where the buyer can ask you to fix things. And if you don't, they can back out, keep their earnest money, and move on and go buy something else. And you've been off the market for 2 to 3 weeks, and that kind of blows, but it is what it is. So when you do agree, though, so let's say you've gone through the request for the repairs and you've even done a little bit of a back and forth. Well, I won't do X, but I will do Y. And then they say, yeah, that seems reasonable. I'll agree to that. That form actually says that then they're going to remove their investigation contingency. Okay. Something just to keep in mind, it would be good if the form came with it. I always include it as a buyer's agent where I only where I say, hey, if you guys all agree to this, because maybe we haven't fully gotten our insurance done, maybe we're getting the inspection done pretty quickly, maybe not everything has been looked at, I'll always put in there that, okay, if we agree to everything, then the attached contingency removal, which will only say that it's the inspection, the structural inspection is included in this removal. Anyway, I don't want to get too deep into the weeds on this general conversation that we're having about escrow, But when we get to that point, you will know it because we'll have a conversation about it. So if you agree to everything, generally speaking, that part, that contingency will be removed. Okay. Loan contingency, obviously, it's up to the lender. We've got some lenders that are fantastic and they're always just on time, got everything done. There's other lenders out there that they just don't share our sense of urgency. But appraisals are usually ordered pretty quickly. Usually those are back in time. Again, they must be removed in writing. If they're not technically, they remain in place forever. So we need to, try to, my job is to try to get those removed, kind of push the buyers and buyer's agent to, okay, we're past that. Can we, let's get that contingency removal. And if we have to give a notice to perform, and I have, and depending on our strategy, which we'll speak about it, every little situation is going to be different. But there's definitely been strategy that we've used in the past that's like, nope, we're going to push. And here's why. So, inspections and property access. So, the buyer, something to keep in mind too, is they're going to need access to the home, obviously, to do the inspection. As a seller, you should not be there during that time. They need to have that flexibility of being able to walk through the property with their inspector, have some free reign, if you will. I would say it's not in the contract, but they do get access. If somebody's there, it's probably not ideal. Even for you, it's not fun to hear people talking about your house anyway. It could be a little awkward, to be perfectly honest, but usually they take a couple of hours. And so you're going to want to, if you've got the pets too, you're going to want to gather up the pets. You're going to want to make sure that you're gone. And it's, again, I would plan on at least 3 hours of being gone so that they can do their due diligence and go through everything. So that's the general home inspection. And the buyers pay for that. Okay. The things you're going to pay for are going to be the homeowners association documents, if there are any. And that's pretty much it. So you do need to leave all the utilities on if you're not living there. In fact, they really need to be on the whole time. Why turn them off and then just incur a fee to turn them back on once you get a signed around contract, and then you have to have them on for that inspection to happen. So just have them on, and if you don't for any reason, keep me posted. Let's make sure that we get them turned on. The termite inspection, you can hire your own termite company to do so. Sometimes the buyers will request a specific termite company. Sometimes the buyer's agent doesn't even add it into the contract. So doesn't have to be done unless it's in the contract. So in our case, the termite, as a seller, you're generally going to be paying for that. Inspections around here usually run anywhere from $75 to $150. And then if there's any what they call Section 1 termites, so there's actual termites, or there is wood rot or different things that can be called out. If there's a loan, it will probably have to be fixed. If there is not a loan and it's cash, it can generally be a point of negotiation. So depending on where you're at, maybe the buyer gave you a really nice offer. And so you're more inclined to say, yes, of course, I'll spend the $500 and get the wood rot taken care of and do that. If it's been kind of a tougher go and maybe they really got you lower than you really wanted to be on that price or whatever, maybe you have a different conversation unless it's required for the loan. Any additional inspections that they choose, they need to be free to do anything that they would like. And something else as far as disclosures are concerned too, speaking of this, I've never actually seen someone do a lead-based paint inspection, like actually have somebody come out and test it. But if the home was built before 1978, you will be required to disclose that there could be lead-based paint. And that disclosure, I'm filing back in my head going, did I forget one? I don't think so. I think I got all of them. But anyway, usually that disclosure is that you don't know anything. If your property was built before 1978, though, make sure that we do the lead-based paint disclosure. It will probably be that I don't know anything about lead-based paint, or I don't have any reports. But if you do, then we need to provide them to the buyer, right? We're so far away from that year at this point. I was born in 73. So, but we're almost to the point where it's like, it's almost 50 years at this point where since the last time lead-based paint was used. So the farther we get away from that, the less people really have any information about it, because it's like, well, I don't know. This was before I was born, right? A lot of home buyers are a lot younger than me and will be, they are like, I don't know. I don't know anything about this, or home sellers rather. Okay, so one important, utilities, I already said that. All right, so deposit and buyer commitment. So that earnest money deposit that we were talking about in this area, and we probably had this conversation if you and I are talking because you're my client, the customary earnest money is 3%, give or take. They need to deposit that within 3 business days. The reason it has to be business days is because the bank has to be open and escrow has to be open to receive it, right? So if you have a contract that got signed around on a Thursday, and let's say Monday is a holiday, let's say it's Memorial Day. So you say, okay, this is how we count days. So Thursday is the day that it was agreed to. You go Friday, Saturday, Sunday, but of course those aren't working days, right? Not Monday. So Tuesday, Wednesday. So Friday, Tuesday, Wednesday. So they have to have their deposit in. It's almost a whole week, but the banks have to be open and they have to have that ability to do it. So that is how the earnest money works. Every other contract date will be counted in the same way, unless all the rest of them are not business days, but it will be counted in the same way. So if it's a 5-day contingency period for something, and you start on Thursday, and you'll go Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. Okay, so everything else is not business days, right? So that would be the final day, because it can't be. So Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. Tuesday would be day 5. If you started on Tuesday and you went Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, it will get pushed out to Monday. It will get pushed out to the next business day. If we're talking about Memorial Day again, it'll get pushed out to Tuesday, because it can't end. The Sundays and holidays can be counted. So let's say 17 days for your inspection. Those days can be counted, but you just can't end on that day. Okay, so just whatever the day ends, if it's not a business day, it'll get pushed out to the next business day, even though they get counted in between, if that makes sense. The appraisal, the appraiser needs to come in and see the home. We're going to have to make sure that they get in as well. So we need to let in any appraisers, any inspectors, anything that needs to be done in that realm. So the lender's going to be working hard on their end to be getting that loan pushed through. That's really the main reason. There's 2 reasons why these things take so long. The 30 days, right? The pretty typical 30 days. The one of them is just getting the loan process. And then the other one is, in a lot of cases, just getting homeowners association documents. Sometimes those can be kind of tough to get as well, timing wise. So obviously we're going to keep on top of it. We're going to double check everybody, but we just want to make sure that we're watching this. And of course, if it's a cash buyer, it's much simpler. There's no loan or appraisal contingency. Normally, there can be an appraisal contingency. If the buyer still wants to get an appraisal done, they can. If the contingency was part of the contract, they can still back out if the appraisal comes in low. Even if they're a cash buyer, they would have to pay for their own appraisal and they'd have to take care of that. But in theory, that's something that they could do if it was part of the contract. Okay, closing preparation. As we get closer to closing, escrow will prepare your final settlement statement. So you'll know how much you're getting. Buyers are getting their own, you're getting yours. Hopefully it's close to the net sheet that I would have also done for you. We'll review the numbers together, should you have any questions, of course. And then you're going to sign your documents either with escrow or with a mobile notary. And in some cases, when it's pretty cut and dried, like a cash buyer, a lot of times there's not quite as much to sign. Sometimes you can go to your bank and there's one page that needs to be notarized and you go get that page taken care of and that's it. You send everything back to escrow. So a lot of people are selling remotely here, and just know that it doesn't really matter where you are. They will get somebody to you to get those documents signed and taken care of, and they'll take care of, FedExing or whatever, unless you decide you just want to go get that one notary done, and then you can FedEx it down to escrow and they'll take care of everything for you. So behind the scenes, I am tracking the timelines and the deadlines. I'm coordinating inspections and access. In other words, the buyer will let me know, or the buyer's agent will let me know what time the buyer would like to go get into the home to do the inspection. Keep in mind, we want to be flexible. I know it's a lot because you're packing and you're getting ready for everything, but we want to make sure that we are being as accessible as possible, because the sooner these things get done, the sooner these contingencies in theory can get removed, right? So let's get them through, right? Communicating with the buyer's agent, with the lender, with escrow, making sure everything's being taken care of, checking in and seeing how the loan's going. Those are things that I will be definitely doing. So, and be keeping you posted too. What I like to do is every 4 days or so, unless there's something specific happening, I'll give you an update of just like, well, not a lot, nothing's going on right now, just FYI. The next thing we'll be tracking is X. Okay, so I'll definitely be keeping you in the loop as to how this is going, because I know there's a lot going on. It's something to keep in mind too as you're packing. If you are packing up any important papers that could in any way be needed for this, and as a buyer, like I will give an example of a divorce decree that tends to get packed up, and and people are trying to get their loan and they need that divorce decree for the loan that they're getting. And if you're selling, you might be buying on the other end, and you might need, anyway, as you're packing stuff up, any important papers, I would recommend getting a big manila envelope and putting it on your kitchen counter. And as these put it away when people are coming to inspect and stuff, but as these important papers, as you come across them as you're packing, put them in that envelope, right? Make sure that those are set aside. A lot of stuff we can get online these days, but there's still things that we can't, or that if we do, it's going to be a whole thing going through courts or whatever. So just something to keep in mind. I think it'll be a handy tip for you. So as we go through this, the things that I'll need from you is quick signatures on documents when they come through. I can't stress how important it is not to let these things linger. We've got to get these things moving as soon as possible. Any questions that you have, just definitely let me know. Don't just assume that there's a dumb question, because there aren't any. If this was like this easy process, we wouldn't even be needed. It's a very complicated process, and it's a little job security, to be perfectly honest. So, any questions you have, reach out. Keep the property in the same condition people saw it under the contract. I cannot stress that one enough either, because if you let the pool get green, if you let the weeds grow, if you let any number of things happen, this is not good. And you have contractually said that you're going to keep the property in, generally speaking, the same condition that the buyer saw it in. Okay, so we can't let them go to their final walkthrough, which they get to do within 5 days of closing, by the way. They're able to go in again and do their final walkthrough. We call it the verification of property here. And they need to walk through. Now, this is not a contingency, but they do get an opportunity to go through and make sure that everything's basically what they expected. And if things were going to be fixed, they've been fixed. And as you're getting things fixed, we want to make sure that we keep the invoices from all of the people, the vendors that are doing the fixing. And we want to get those to the buyers. Proof that you fixed it, proof that it's on them if it doesn't work, right? Keep your utilities on. Keep your utilities on through the day of closing. And I would call about a week out. We should know the closing date at that point. Again, that can be flexible. Things happen. There's a lot of people working on these transactions. There's escrow, title, lenders, processors who work for lenders, underwriters, other agents, other humans with human emotions, that things happen, right? So you're going to want to make sure that once we know the closing date, and we will suspect that it's going to be this date, but just in case, it can be shifted around a little bit. But we will get to escrow, and you want to make sure you're calling those utilities, because it's a good idea, because you never know, the buyers might have forgotten, and you don't want to be paying for the utilities when they're technically responsible for that, right? So just make sure to call. Now, if you are in, and I'll give you an example, in Indio and most of the Coachella Valley, Your trash goes with the property. They're going to know because the county is going to switch it around. Basically, because pay with the property taxes. So who cares? Your property taxes will be prorated. That's another thing to keep in mind. Something else to keep in mind that's actually not on here is that, a lot of people, if we're closing really close to the beginning of the month and people are like, well, my next payment's due or this or that, talk to escrow because your payments on your loan, if you send in your payment on the 1st and we close on the 2nd, you're going to get it back, but it's just going to be a while. So you want to talk to escrow because usually escrow has already talked to the lender. Well, they have to have because they have to pay off your loan. So they're going to have your payoff, and the payoff is good until this date. Okay. And so if you're inside that, call escrow, say, hey, I'm wondering if I should be making my payment on my loan. Likely they're going to tell you, no, don't worry about it because that's just going to get covered with the payoff. Okay. You're not going to be late or whatever. Same thing with homeowners association dues. All of that gets prorated by escrow to make sure that everything is nice and neatly tied up. Not utilities. But again, if it's trash, it's part of, or sewer in our case, it's part of your property taxes and that was prorated. So you'll be fine for that. But you're going to want to call your power company or call all the other things. You don't have to keep the Wi-Fi on, by the way. That is not necessarily something that you're going to need unless you need it to run certain things in the home. Okay. So if you're trying to run your thermostat or something like that. And it's important that you keep an eye on the temperature because you don't want a huge bill because somebody accidentally turned it down and left it down and it's the middle of summer. Probably good to keep that Wi-Fi on. It's probably worth it. So the other thing made me think of something and now I'm forgetting, but anyway. So yeah, if you have receipts, upgrades, info about the home, again, that would be helpful. Over the next few days, specifically what you can expect. Okay, so now we're back to the beginning of the escrow period. So you can expect the buyer is going to submit their earnest money deposit. The inspections are going to be scheduled. The disclosures need to be created, right, and signed, and then they need to review them. And then pretty much a lot of stuff happens right in the beginning, and then it's a little quiet until your closing date, right? So you can just be packing and doing things. So as things move quickly, we'll get those taken care of. And then again, then we're just going to wait for a while and see, let them do their loan and things. So in closing, obviously I'll be in communication with you on a regular basis. I'm sure whatever agent you've picked will be as well. And if you have any questions, I am here. So if you are not one of my clients, and you haven't met me yet, my name is Lisa Angel, and I am with LPT Realty. I've been a real estate agent for 27 years. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. I would so appreciate it. And then if you want to see more like this, subscribe. And if you are my client, thank you so much for being my client, and let's get this thing closed smoothly for you. Have a great day.